Let's venture into the weird world of Games Workshop pricing abnormalities and talk about the curious case of the Tyranids Combat Patrol, basically a kit that you should probably never buy. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought we'd talk about the Tyranids Combat Patrol set, and maybe just do a quick PSA to underline it to newer players to the game that this kit is probably one that you want to avoid, even if it looks basically very similar to most of the rest of the Combat Patrols out there. Essentially because Games Workshop has other kits within their range that make it directly redundant. Let's talk about the Combat Patrol box itself, the slightly different way in which they chose to release it compared with the rest of the kits out there, how much worse it is than their other offerings, and why Games Workshop choose to do these sort of strange pricing maneuvers. I think perhaps the reason it's worth underlining a fair bit is that if you just look up Combat Patrols in the Games Workshop web store, and there's not really much to differentiate it from the rest here, just looks very similar to the rest. At the same price and a very similar number of model offerings. It maybe does feel just a little bit disingenuous though that they don't make it a little bit more clear that there's other things in their range that you might consider if you want these miniatures, and that it's not really that good a purchase. Objectively, the contents of the box I'd argue are fairly good ones though as Combat Patrols go. It is the same price as the others at £95, €125 or $160, and at that kind of price, if you are set on spending them on Games Workshop miniatures, most other things that you buy for that kind of money you wouldn't get quite as much plastic, or quite as recent plastic perhaps. There are a good number of models in the box here, with 32 of them. Some of them are kind of elite or interesting as well, it's not just literally hordes, and it is kind of fun to have some of the newer sculpts in here. I do quite like the Von Ryan's Leapers and Winged Prime, and the Psychophage in particular with the Great Devouring Tyranid Tick Mug. These kind of box sets maybe shouldn't be directly compared enormously to any multi-part plastic kits, given that these ones are all monopose, and I guess in particular the Termagants don't come with extra special weapons and things. So if you're absolutely set on getting the spike rifles or the strangle web guns, then this isn't the kit for you, and the same for alternate weapon options like spine fists or devourers. Still though, if you were to compare them to the kit prices separately, you'd probably get a deal around about 44% off, which is quite good as Games Workshop goes. There's quite a lot of combat patrols that either get you significantly less plastic here, and significantly less discount, often down in the 20s or 30s for some of the worst ones. The release for the Combat Patrol maybe gives it away a little bit that Games Workshop isn't really anticipating selling very many of these, as their normal process is they both release things on the Games Workshop web store and also have most of their new offerings available to order from third-party stockists as well. For any local gaming stores or online retailers that often sell their stuff at a bit of a discount, but it looks like this new Combat Patrol seems to be web store only. I don't know if they'd ever consider releasing it as a third-party thing as well, but at the moment it doesn't look like any of the usual third parties do have it on sale. That is a bit on the unusual side, and again not a mark in this box's favour as it means that you don't get the third-party discounts as I'll mention in a second. Of course though, the main reason that it is inferior though is because you can basically buy these exact same miniatures literally from Games Workshop's own web store in another form and get more of them. The Warhammer 40k standard starter set has these Tyranids versus these Space Marines. It's basically the entire Tyranids Combat Patrol minus the Barb Gaunts, which Games Workshop do sell separately. And if you add together the price of the starter set and the Barb Gaunts kit, then it comes out to less than the Combat Patrol bought directly. The Combat Patrol basically charges you more for fewer miniatures, as you don't get those random bonus Space Marines thrown in, which is a fairly considerable thing with 2 squads and a character. Obviously if you're collecting Tyranids, then Space Marines aren't necessarily very helpful. Can be fun to have a few bonus miniatures just to paint up though, if you fancy, and of course you could get some better value savings on the big starter set box if you split it with a Marine player. They take the Terminators, Captain and Infernus Marines, or even just resell them on eBay if there's no one around who wants to split the box with you. The 40k starter set also comes with a few dice and a cardboard gaming mat as well, for those who care about that. Again, it is just really quite a funny thing for Games Workshop pricing, where they're basically charging you more for one box set and then giving you fewer miniatures than 2 different ones. It's pretty much the opposite of how things work when you're selling things in most stores. Usually you think that if you get the bigger, more complete box, then that tends to be the better deal overall. The money savings maybe aren't enormous at £2.50, €5 or $5, but it's certainly not nothing. I say as well, if you were thinking about getting the Tyranid Combat Patrol, I'd also consider the Ultimate Starter Set as another thing that might actually be more useful than those 2 boxes combined. This is the one that's £125, €160 or $210. Again, this one basically contains all the miniatures in the Tyranid Combat Patrol, and then while it does cost more at an extra £30, €35 or $50, You get a pretty crazy amount of stuff extra for that cost, the entire Space Marine Combat Patrol, some fairly expensive terrain from Games Workshop if you bought some terrain from them, a fairly nice mini-core rulebook that would have some resale value if you didn't want it, plus gaming boards and dice and things. Again, for this one, I'd say it's to the extent where it's just probably not worth considering the Combat Patrol virtually whatsoever when this box exists, as the extra investment that you get towards this one probably gets you more Warhammer than you get virtually anywhere else if it's compared directly against the Nids Combat Patrol. Finally, as mentioned, if you do happen to live somewhere where you can get third-party discounts from either friendly local gaming stores or online retailers, then again that's a big mark against the Tyranid Combat Patrol. The barb gaunts and the starter sets aren't direct only, so you can often get somewhere between 10 and 20% discounts depending on where you live in the world. As always, I have a few of the bigger name discount retailers down linked in the video description. Element Games in the UK for 15% off, Gap Games in Australia for 20% off, and Noble Knight in the USA for around about 8 usually. Just taking the UK as an example, if you bought the £95 Combat Patrol from Games Workshop, then it basically works out that you could get the 40k starter sets plus the barb gaunts for around about £79, that's just from Element Games, saving £16 and netting the Terminators, again just making the Combat Patrol Tyranids look even worse. In any case, I just thought that was worth underlining just in case anyone was thinking about picking up the Tyranids Combat Patrol. It's a similar sort of situation to what Necrons had in 9th edition, what with their Warrior box and the Recruit starter set. Again, it's mainly a symptom of Games Workshop just trying to offer their starter sets being a significantly better deal compared with the rest of the products that they sell, as it kind of makes sense for them, as that's going to be the sort of thing that attracts new players into the game. For the Necron case, the Recruit starter set contained the box of warriors just the same as the regular one would, and cost roughly the same price, but in the Recruit set you also basically got an essentially free Royal Warden, Primaris Lieutenant, and 5 Assault Intercessors. I did find it kind of funny as well, due to price rises and Games Workshop trying to keep their starter sets out of it, that in some countries like New Zealand I believe the Recruit box set was actually somehow cheaper than a Necron Warrior box set, despite it just being a Necron Warrior box set with 2 extra characters and more Marines. I think that the motivation behind this is for Games Workshop to keep their pricing consistent, basically. It does kind of make sense from their perspective, as they kind of have their core range, which they just price one way, and they're not going to deviate from it just because they happen to offer a starter box set. And keeping the Tyranids Combat Patrol at the higher price does a couple of things. First up, it maybe tries to underline that their 40k starter sets are a better deal compared with most of their range, which to be fair, they are comparatively. And then also it's partly because the starter box sets don't have an unlimited lifespan. At the moment, 40k editions seem to be lasting around about 3 years since their big hard 8th edition reset, so my guess would be that these starter sets, while they're new at the moment, they've basically got around about a 3-year product life cycle, and then after that they'll go away, and the way to get the Tyranids models will be the more expensive Combat Patrol, kind of at a temporary 3-year discount while the Tyranids are all shiny and new. In any case, let me know what you make of the pricing changes, and I'd be interested to hear if you or anyone you know has picked up a Tyranid Combat Patrol box set, and if so, I'd be kind of interested as to whether it was a deliberate choice or not knowing the other options. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, while I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.